personal friend.
Okay, we are on in this very moment. Dobar dan. And hi, hello. I will switch to English now because with us is today Jeremy Shermour. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi.
He is our guest from, in this moment, from Dumfries in Scotland. Yes. You are welcome, Jeremy. So let me introduce myself. My name is Željko Ivanković, and I am editor of Ideje.hr, and I am your host today. This is our first discussion in English. It is, I think, from the last autumn, it is 9 discussion. All of those discussions were in Croatian, of course. And the subject of today's discussion is conspiracy theories. Together with me is Professor Puchovski, and we are expecting here will come in this room, and we are expecting here will come Božo Kovačević because he will bring. Okay, I will explain why he is coming later. So we have 3 speakers today. Jeremy Shermour is Jeremy Shermour, Nebojša Blanuša, and Žarko Puchovski. I will briefly introduce all of them. So I am happy to welcome Professor Shermour. Jeremy is Emeritus Fellow Fellow at the Australian National University. He published several books, mostly about Popper and Hayek. He used to teach in the US and also in Scotland at the London School of Economics. Together, he was assistant of Karl Popper. So it is just a brief introduction because you can inform using internet, so yourself using internet about Jeremy. So, and our next speaker is Nebojša Blanuša. He is associate professor at the Faculty of Political Science in Zagreb. Nebojša published a book about conspiracy theories in Croatia, and he speaks from Samobor. It is a satellite city close to Zagreb, so only to inform Jeremy. Our third speaker is Professor Puchovski. He used to teach political philosophy at the Faculty of Philosophy in Zagreb for 40 years, for more or less 40 years. Okay. Besides his books, he is well-known public intellectual in Croatia and in the surrounding countries in the region. He is also one of the founders of Croatian Helsinki Committee for Human Rights. Each of them will speak max 20 minutes. At 15 minutes, I will show them 5 minutes left, and I expect in 20 minutes they will complete. They will finish. As Jeremy said earlier, we can mute them at 20 minutes. So. And in total 1 hour, and then after that 1 hour, I'm expecting you who are with us today to join the discussion. If you want to be first with the discussion, please use chat icon, and send the message to Robert, who is helping here. Who is here to helping with me with the technology. So send that, and he will inform me about. So. I think it is, if we start with Jeremy, we can start now. Please, Jeremy.
Thank you.
You can share your screen. Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the thing to share with the second screen. My title is Conspiracies and Lies. The presentation today can only be brief, and as a result, it may come over as simplistic or unduly polemical. I trust that I'm not actually simplistic, but that is for you to judge. I've written at slightly greater length and slightly greater finesse in a piece which has just appeared in Croatian in Ideje, but that is also brief. I'll be concerned here with three issues: conspiracy theories, truth, and learning from one another. While he is in no sense to be blamed for what I'm going to be saying today, my presentation will be influenced by some ideas from Karl Popper. First, conspiracy theories. Thanks to the internet and especially social media, we seem these days to be beset by conspiracy theories at almost every side. I'd like to make 4 points about them. The first is that there's every reason to suppose that there are people who engage in conspiracies. The second is that conspiracies are seldom altogether successful. Conspirators are often betrayed, not least by one another, but they also, like the rest of us, typically get things wrong, and what happens as a result of their actions is often not what they intended. Third, conspiracy theories tend to assume that what happens in the world, especially when things go wrong, is the result of someone's intention, in this case of conspirators. But this assumption is problematic. What happens in the social world is more plausibly to be seen as a product of fallible human actions, undertaken within social structures which constrain us in various ways, and where what results is typically the unintended consequence of many people's intentional actions. The idea that there must be some intention behind any large-scale effect, human, divine, or in some sense of there being a telos to history, seems to me to be the typical view of someone who hasn't learned anything from those social sciences which deal with these phenomena. Hayek's Law, Legislation and Liberty, Volume 1 is, I think, quite good in arguing this. At the same time, the social sciences may obviously inform us about things which are not part of common sense knowledge. There may indeed be structural constraints on what we might be able to achieve in a society of a particular kind. So we may find that we have strong preference for something happening and it doesn't happen. Well, this may be a product of various kinds of structural constraints. So that attempts to realize particular goals, even if they're widely shared, may not be successful. Or, which is almost a triviality in political science, some economic or political groups may be in a position to influence political outcomes in a way that the rest of us ordinary citizens can't. If someone wishes to advance a conspiracy theory, then they're obviously free to do so, but we need to bear in mind the kinds of things that would be required to make it plausible. It needs obviously to offer an explanation of what it sets out to explain, but it needs then to provide cogent evidence in its support. And this means not just points that confirm it, but rather to indicate how it can be tested and that it passes genuine tests. Or if it isn't the kind of thing that's testable, the proponents of it need to indicate other ways in which it can be critically appraised. A key issue here is that those who favor such a view need to negotiate with people who don't agree with them what worthwhile tests and what a worthwhile basis for appraisal would actually amount to. And also to bear in mind that confirmations which are not the products of such tests are worthless. And more generally, that even if the theories pass difficult tests, this doesn't show that they're true. Even our best and best confirmed theories are fallible. Above all, one needs to be careful because as human beings, we're prejudiced and tend to be too easily contented with ideas and confirmations which fit our prejudices, as I'll discuss. Not only are there lots of conspiracy theories around, but those who favor them seem strikingly incapable of learning that there are problems about their views. A key issue here is that we are all fallible, but that we can hope to learn from one another if we approach each other in the right spirit. A starting point here is to accept that we are indeed fallible and need to learn from others. But this means that we should drop any tendency to dismiss others as simply purveying fake news. Of course, other people may be wrong, but so equally may we be. Other people or sources of information may be biased, but so may we. The only way to learn is to explore what other people may be saying by way of criticism of our ideas, and for us to be open to the idea that they be making reasonable points. A key issue here is one that Karl Popper stressed. It is that what we need is to expose our ideas to criticism and, if we can, to empirical evaluation. And that what is important is putting ideas to tests that it will not be easy for them to pass. As humans, we naturally seek confirmations of our views. This is what makes us happy. But what we need, could you stop shuffling the papers on the table? Sorry, this is coming over as deafening.
Okay, because...
Okay. What we need is to hold our views open to possible refutations and to ensure that they can be assessed by tough-minded critics. The problem, as I mentioned, is that we are naturally inclined not to behave in this way. We're all too likely just to seek confirmations. But that is a bit like asking your mother if you're beautiful or handsome and whether you have a good character, and then being impressed by what she has to say. It's not actually useful appraisal. These days, things are tougher for us just because of the influence of the internet, social media, and the increasing tendency of news sources to take an explicitly political stance. Not only do people tend to like things that confirm their views, but social media, for the sake of their profits, give you the very thing that, if you're interested in truth, you should avoid. That's to say, they can create a bubble around you within which your prejudices are systematically confirmed and in which you are given bogus confirmations of your ideas, however poor they may be. This issue, I should say, is contentious. There's a guy called Axel Burns, Are Filter Bubbles Real?, where he's offered some criticism of this, but there seems to me to be enough truth to this to give us pause. What's to be done? First, we again need to remember that we're fallible, that ideas that attract us may well be false, and that the fact that we are certain of something doesn't mean that it's true. Second, we need to hold fast to the idea of truth and of its importance, but to remember that it is something to which we aspire rather than something that we can be sure that we already possess. Third, we need to bear in mind that we have biases and preconceptions, and that the only ready way of learning about these things is to get criticism from other people. They will have their biases and preconceptions as well, and we may become conscious of these biases pretty quickly. However, this doesn't mean that we should simply dismiss them, because if we do dismiss them, this stops us from learning anything. I personally hope that if hell exists, someone who gets to roast in the hottest part of it is a well-known political figure who simply dismissed any view that went against his own prejudices as fake news. But it is all too easily to inadvertently line up with him. and to dismiss anything that other people might have to say in criticism of ideas because of their national or ethnic, class or religious background. They may indeed have got things wrong, and indeed may exhibit prejudices which often go exactly with those characteristics. But these people are crucial to us, as we are to them, if we're to be able to learn from one another when we've got things wrong. And just because work is written from a particular perspective which we correctly think is problematic, doesn't mean that there is nothing of value in it. Another way of looking at this relates to the ideal of objectivity. This can be a problem. Those who think they're objective are typically people who are simply oblivious to their own biases. Objectivity, in my view, and here again, I'm following Popper, is not best seen as a characteristic of people as individuals, or indeed as members of groups or classes, but rather it's something that's best understood as a social product to which we might aspire if we set out to learn from one another. To do this means that we need to work towards procedures which are fair and which give us all the chance of learning. But we may well be mistaken about what would enable us to do this. In this respect, I think we should be open to the idea, from wherever it may come, that our existing procedures may need revising. But this is something that needs to be argued for, and no one should be allowed to presume that it is they who have access to the correct views, which no one else should be able to question. Also, here and elsewhere, to raise a valid criticism is important, but it doesn't in itself assist us to move to what we need, namely new procedures and new ideas, which enable us to learn better from one another or to get to better substantive views. And it seems to me that if there's a besetting sin of politics at the moment, it is the idea that if something is problematic and you protest against it, then that in itself should fix the problem. It doesn't. You need to go on to propose better institutions. But what about conspiracy theories? Let me try to bring these remarks together by returning to the problem of conspiracy theories. First, trying to suppress the advocacy of such things seems to me counterproductive. If people think that an elite is manipulating everything, how better to make such a view plausible than if they can furnish evidence that the very expression of their view is being suppressed by an elite. Second, I'd suggest that one needs to engage with the proponents of such views, discussing what they think makes those views plausible and what would be a good test of such ideas or what would otherwise be good ways of assessing them. Third, I'd suggest that we need to give hard thought to the recreation of a public sphere within which we can learn better from one another, and of how existing institutions might be modified to such a purpose. For example, we might seek to develop television shows conducted with ground rules which make it possible to learn with one another. Commercial incentives currently lead commercial programs to generate situations in which moderators are encouraged to get their guests to shout at one another and to get excited rather than to engage in dialogue, or in which, if programs are not commercial, supercilious hosts look down their noses at anyone who is not woke, when, of course, such a perspective is equally fallible, or if you put someone else in charge who is slighting against other perspectives. Fourth, it's really important that records are kept of various ideas and of how they're modified over time. A key theme in the work of Karl Popper and of Imre Lakatos was that it's not enough just to look at ideas as they're currently presented. What we need to do rather is to track how some idea has been developed by its proponents over time. There are few views which can't be made plausible if one simply listens to what someone says now. They may be a lot less plausible if one bears in mind what was said initially and with how its proponents coped with the fact that their initial claims didn't actually hold good. We need to be confronted with our track record and not allowed to simply redefine what our view is now without, if we want to change it, having to explain how what we're saying now relates to what we said in the past. This seems to me particularly important as a weapon against conspiracy theories. One topic in which I once became interested is the history of prophecies about the end of the world. A striking thing about them isn't just that the world didn't end when prophesied, but that those who are in the business of making these prophecies, typically when the world didn't end, redefined what the world meant, such as by saying, yes, physically the world hasn't ended, but spiritually we're now in a different era. Or simply that they said new and yet more striking things while doing what they could to stop their followers coming across their earlier claims. They keep them secret. Accordingly, in my view, we shouldn't suppress conspiracy theories, but rather keep records of them and how they develop over time, and create forums into which proponents of such theories are invited, not so that we can shout at them, but instead discuss with them in a calm and rational way whether the accounts initially that we offer of what they've said over time are in fact correct, and what modifications have been made to them in the light of prior failures. And then how, in their view, we should now set about appraising their ideas. A vital role which we can all play in all this is simply not making use of sources, for example, newspapers, which don't allow for criticism of what is being said by their readers. Or if we can't avoid making use of such sources, at least to make sure that we consult a range of sources which are known to have biases of different kinds on anything that's controversial. Not only should we, in my view, do this personally, but we should indicate to other people that if they don't do this, they're in danger of simply becoming the prisoners of their own prejudices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. As you said earlier, if I give you 20 minutes, you will use 15 minutes, and you used only less than 20 minutes in any case. So thank you very much. It was very clear and very understandable and very with very direct statements. So
and presumably wrong.
Yes, you said people are fallible. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is, I will introduce Božo Kovačević. He joined us, and I will later explain the purpose of his joining, or not only for the discussion. So our next speaker is Nebojša Blanuša, and I hope he will also use 20 minutes max.
I really don't know. Okay, thank you very much. It is great to be here. So my question is also what is to be done with this nasty and contagious object of public discourse which relegation lasts now for almost 90 years. So in that sense, I would like to start with sorry, something doesn't function. Okay, I would like to start with a piece of history and to differentiate a usage of conspiracy theories in the public discourse versus conceiving conspiracy theory as scholarly concept. First of all, theory of conspiracy appeared in the second part of the 19th century at trials and then in the public, and some authors think that this piece of paper that I show you here shows the first first appearance of the theory of conspiracy in 1875 in the Boston Journal. But of course, you all know probably that conspiracy as a judicial concept has a long tradition in Anglo-Saxon law for more than 600 years. But today, it is used as a dirty word or an insult. And if you want to insult someone, just say that his or her interpretation is nothing but a conspiracy theory. So it is usually considered in the public discourse as a bizarre mode of thought or obscure gesture. My question is, how did it become an illegitimate knowledge? To simplify, I think that this is a matter of specific political context, work of prominent scholars, among them was also Popper, and media dissemination. These authors, I could simply say from 1930s to 1970s, they conceived conspiracy theories in the space from bad imitation of scientific theory to political or even clinical psychology. Today, it is accepted as a symptom of unreason, and beside that, it is conceived also a reason for exclusion. This demystification or stigmatization of conspiracy theory was conducted in 3 phases. The first way was due to fear of totalitarianism, and the first author was Harold Lastwell, and then Popper was also in this group. In the second wave, it was influenced by Red Scare, and in the third way, by political extremism. I think that Richard Hofstadter was in this group the most prominent author. So such discourse about conspiracy theory was developed due to these 3, I would say, 3 fears of contagion. And they produce it and disseminated also as an a priori flawed interpretation with potentially dangerous consequences, and they produced also pathologizing effect. So today's mainstream attitude is that conspiracy theories should be neither believed nor investigated, that they are a sort of shallow phenomenon which cannot tell us anything about functioning of the social world, and also a form of common unwisdom. But sometimes it's quite reasonable to believe in conspiracy theories, such as when I say that, I think I conceive conspiracy theories in a broader way. It means to use conspiratorial frame of thinking. So one of the most prominent critique of such, we can say, traditional approach to conspiracy theories was one philosopher from New Zealand. Contrary to all these authors, he said that we are, in his opinion, we are rationally entitled to believe in conspiracy theories if that is what the evidence suggests. Some conspiracy theories for him are sensible, and some are, of course, silly. But if they are silly, this is not because they are conspiracy theories, but because they suffer from some specific defect. For instance, that the conspiracies they postulate are impossible or far-fetched. And also for Pigden, every historically or politically literate person is to a great extent a conspiracy theorist, even though many intellectuals and political commentators are not aware of this fact. And he said, if you believe in sources of public information, such as media, institutions, historical texts, etc., a great deal of what is presented to us is not possible to explain outside of the conspiratorial interpretation framework. Also, there are so many conspiracy theories that are accepted as unproblematic and legitimate knowledge. For example, whatever we might think about 9/11, it is rational to believe that this event is a result of conspiracy. Otherwise, we should assume that the perpetrators have been assembled by accident with a sudden idea to hijack the plans and crash them into the Twins, the White House, etc. But this is not even considered as a credible conspiracy theory. Moreover, history abounds of assassinations, mass murders, etc., that are inconceivable outside of the conspiratorial framework. And if we accept that conspiracy theory shouldn't be investigated nor believed, well, then we are on the road of very dangerous historical revisionism. Even at the everyday democratic politics, conspiracies are common. For example, in leadership challenge, in bribery, in corruption, etc. So people are prone to conspire. Therefore, consistent acceptance of conventional wisdom about conspiracy theories might lead us into an absurd situation, render many parts of history unbelievable and unknowable, along with being politically extremely dangerous. If we did not believe in conspiracy theories, then we would not even be allowed to investigate these questions, since any answer we came up would be something we were not entitled to believe. We could believe, for example, in dead bodies, but not that anyone had conspired to kill them. Believe in the missing money, but not in the felonious theft. And it would be a political disaster. In that case, the principle that the price of freedom is constant vigilance becomes a meaningless phrase. We would be officially blind if we accept this common wisdom to most serious threats to the democratic order. This critique has initiated the debate about conspiracy theories as knowledge, and their main conclusions of such philosophical debate was that, first of all, it's very hard to establish the formal criteria for determination of warranted from unwarranted conspiracy theories without confusing them with conspiracy theorists' tendencies, for example, for fetishistic relationship to errant data. Also, they think that falsifiability is not reasonable criterion for conspiracy theories, because this criterion is invented for natural sciences, first of all. And here in the context of conspiracy theories, the subjects of investigation are not passive. Moreover, it is reasonable to presume active involvement of investigated protagonists in the obstruction of redirection of the investigation, as in cases, for example, of the Watergate and so many others. Also, they think that conspiracy theories do not believe in the brain in the jar hypothesis. They are not radical skeptics, and their basic premises are much more interesting. One of them is the premise that we have little reason to claim positive warrant for our confidence in public institutions of information when critical interests of the dominant powers are at stake. Conspiracy theorists are right when they claim that in today's society, that one Lee Basham thinks, there is unavoidable and serious prior probability of active conspiracies. But another problem is that there is no correct answer to the question how conspiratorial our society is. We are left having only to assume the answer, because we don't know if the basic, so-called observationally given public information is filtered and fabricated or largely accurate. Now we can see how powerful can be the technology with, for example, deep fake. Apart from that, we will never know anything about the unrevealed successful conspiracies. We are actually always left with biased sample. For these reasons, participants in this debate suggest that instead of simply accepting or rejecting conspiracy theories, we need to be equally skeptical towards them as towards other theories, whether we notice internal flaws, such as self-inconsistency, obsolete statements, and discrepancies between theories and facts, etc. Accordingly, some of these authors advocate the golden mean between naivety and paranoia, or as they call it, a studied agnosticism, meaning that every inclination for or against some conspiracy theory should bear a disclaimer warning that it is a tentative belief based on interpretation of the assembled evidences. So the question is then how to study conspiracy theories. My opinion is, instead of relegating conspiracy theories due to fear of contagion, we should think when is prudent to use conspiratorial skepticism and how to improve it. In that sense, I use Pigden's definition of conspiracy theory, which is every interpretation which posits conspiracy. And what I offer is a specific model for understanding conspiracy theories, which resembles an onion, which says basically there are some events which can be interpreted in conspiratorial or non-conspiratorial ways, and there are different layers of interpretation around them. When we go to those outer layers, plausibility of these interpretations become problematic. Also, I prefer to consider conspiracy theories as lay or like hermeneutics of suspicion, which sometimes becomes wild. And if I may use some Zizek'ian ideas, I consider them as symptomal reading of reality. And when you put them together, for example, as in my research on Croatian conspiracy theories, they could be conceived as symptom of wider processes. For example, they reflect political cleavages in Croatia, but possible are two general approaches to conspiracy theories. The one which will not be concerned if they are unjustified or not. And such research will follow an old sociological theorem called Thomas' theorem, which says if people believe in something, they will act as if that exists. And this is an analysis about peculiar beliefs and which influence behavior of people, and that would be a study of subjective knowledge. But if we are dealing with intersubjective knowledge, such approach will deal with the question of knowledge explicitly. Here, the most important questions are: what differentiates warranted from unwarranted conspiracy theories? When paranoia makes sense? Who believes in warranted and unwarranted conspiracy theories, and with what consequences? There are some studies about that even today. One of them is one social psychologist, Roderick Kramer from United States, which deals with conspiracy theories in this framework of paranoid social cognitions. And instead of pathologizing them, he describes them as transient, ordinary, and usually benign forms of social fears and suspiciousness related to disturbing and unexpected events, and they could slide from the ill-conceived, misplaced apprehensions to prudent and an extremely keen and often penetrating observation, which show emotional or social intelligence. Also, he offers a kind of micro model how to study them, which is actually a kind of loop, and the heart of this model is like something that he calls hypervigilance and rumination, which is very controlled process, but it could lead to some judgmental biases. But he perceives them as a form of adaptive behavior. He also speaks about prudent paranoia. What is prudent paranoia? This is an excerpt from one of his text. It is a kind of constructive suspicion. And he applies that to business or organizational environment. According to this excerpt, we can, of course, criticize him for instrumental reasoning, but the question is it possible to apply this to politics? When we talk about politics, I think here we should differentiate leaders from so-called ordinary citizens. And leaders are, of course, more paranoid than ordinary citizens. Why? They work in highly competitive and potentially perilous political environment. They are also under constant media spotlights. Are they more prudent? Probably yes. And especially in instrumental terms are successful, I would say, prominent leaders. We can also hypothesize how deep is their internal split between conspiratorial thinking and more or less non-conspiratorial public communication. They can manage with more or less success the split between internal thinking and public speech, and probably develop a cynical reasoning as it is described by Peter Sloterdijk. However, when outbursts or strategic paranoid behavior comes out, such conspiratorial speech acts can have very serious consequences, especially dangerous when they mobilize the state apparatus and groups of citizens on the basis of collective narcissism. And I think that the right-wing populism do that in recent time very successfully on the level of mobilization. When we speak about citizens, those citizens who are prone to conspiracism, research usually shows that they involve themselves in hyperactive semiosis. That would be something similar to rumination, as it is explained on previous previous slide, and also that leads them away from political participation. What I think is, what I hypothesize is exactly those people are prone to be attracted by the right wing populism. Why? Because as in the case of QAnon, it plays its cards on, first of all, hyperactive semiosis, but by leaving enigmatic cramps on portals such as 4chan, 8chan, etc., and inviting people to do their own research. And also, it plays on one of more fundamental political fantasies about the people, way of life, social order, and dangerous others in the form of corrupted elite. The recent example in front of inside the Congress shows us how easy it is to mobilize people on the basis of simplified and flawed critical thinking. But the real question is how to make such thinking more warrant, more sophisticated, and make it more prudent. I think that 4 elements are here. The most important, those are their conditions of appearance, the so-called kernel of truth in the event, also especially a kind of leap of imagination of people who start to believe in conspiracy theories, and also their consequences. And the question is how to incorporate it into the education system. I think we should here offer, or I can offer a kind of synthetic model which requires multidisciplinary research. And here conspiracy theories are just a tip of the iceberg where we can analyze their logic, structure, discourse, also whether they are legitimate or illegitimate knowledge. Some processes which are covered usually by psychology, social psychology, sociology, and other social sciences and humanities as well, which will deal with socio-cultural conditions of such ideas and also historical trajectories. I'm sorry. Also, we should analyze their proximal antecedents and also distal antecedents, and not only harmful consequences, but potentially beneficial consequences. Okay, I will stop here now. You probably read and saw my other two slides, and we can discuss about that later. Thank you. So,
if you want to conclude, you can conclude with these two slides. There is enough. Few minutes.
There is enough time. Okay.
Yes, 2-3 minutes if you want to.
Okay.
No
only
with a conclusion. Come with a conclusion.
Okay. The question is where to search to analyze and to differentiate warranted from unwarranted conspiracy theories. I can. I suppose that we can differentiate. This is completely arbitrary in portions. Some conspiracy theories which are accepted, some are disputable, some are ludicrous, and some are completely lunatic, of course. I think the best way to analyze them is in the gray zones among disputable conspiracy theories, which are used in different ways and which can give us the highest number of pro and contra arguments. And those are mostly the deep state conspiracy theories, which are a good candidate, and there are also a great deal of literature of deep state conspiracy theories. The question is how useful these studies are for conspiracy theory research, and I find them potentially problematic because they have a holistic point of departure or kind of gestalt bias, which refuses to reduce the deep state of contingent interest networks inside and across the state. So how a kind of research program can be proposed on this topic? We can use this deep state literature to extract their own conspiracy theories and their argumentation, of course, to compare them with similar popular conspiracy theories and to see how spread they are, what are similarities and differences, what are their dynamics of dissemination, etc., and also their change in time. But to compare them on one, I would say, a higher level, we should also consult an expert knowledge of those who are not enchanted by those conspiracy theories, just to get counter argumentation and counter evidences, and of course compare them again to popular conspiracy theories with the purpose to differentiate them and to get more insight into individual differences of people who believe in one or another type of conspiracy theories, what kind of information sources they cherish. And that could be also a basis for more social psychology experimental research, and maybe a good way to build not formal but empirical criteria for differentiating warranted from unwarranted conspiracy theories, but such job is yet to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nebojša. This was completely new approach to conspiracy for me. Completely new approach to conspiracy theories. And we will, first part of our discussion, conclude with the Professor Puchovski. He will not share a screen because doesn't have a PowerPoint presentation, of course. He will speak. He will just speak.
Yeah, I'll speak. Well, let me start with a kind of definition. Conspiracy theories denote an attempt to explain by conspiracy an event that can, at least as convincingly, be explained in another way, or for which it is not possible to find a convincing realistic explanation. which means, in my understanding, conspiracy theories are something that differs from the conspiracy practice. I'm not going to use the Kantian formula of practice with theory, theory with practice. I do think conspiracy theories have the real ideological meaning in terms of being divorced from the reality. The example that was already mentioned, the 9/11, which was, of course, the result of conspiracy, opens, however, the possibility for conspiracy theories and interpretations, which were quite popular in the first few years after the events, which claimed that there were no Jews or practically no Jews in the Twin Towers at the moment of attack. This is now conspiracy theories based on a fact that was really induced by conspiracy act. So there is sometimes a mixture in two levels. In philosophical terms, I understand what we are talking about as kind of perverted version of enlightenment. The idea, the attempt to understand the world strictly in rational terms. The belief there is nothing but rationality that can explain what's going on. And conspiracy theories give a kind of picture of rationality. There is no coincidence. That's the formula. You can find it in very different, you can somehow connect it with very different names like Spinoza or Friedrich Engels, or let's say Leroy Jethro Gibbs, leading figure in a very popular TV show called NCIS. They all say in one sentence, there is no coincidence. When you say coincidence, it means you did not understand what was going on. Or, in words of Albert Einstein, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And of course, being believers, we don't want the God to be anonymous, as you know from the Pater Noster, our Father who are in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We don't want our God to be anonymous. We do not want anything as coincidence to be going on. So we have a kind of crossroad of two conflicting important ideas in Western history, which is Enlightenment and Christian tradition. And one of points where they come together is, in my understanding, what we call conspiracy theories. The condition, the precondition for what we call contemporary conspiracy theories is given paradoxically again by the fact that the modern science with Copernicus started with something that for so-called ordinary people meant the following thing. What you see is not true. The truth is what you can't see. Because what I do see is that sun is revolving around me and I'm sitting here, and that I know that's not truth. The truth is something you can't see. Mysticism was introduced through Copernicus. There was no physical, anthropological, physical in terms of everyday life, kind of context in which you can really show that was true. There were mathematical proofs on a rather high level of abstraction, at least for the people of that time. And there was nothing in our daily life experience that would somehow coincide with what Copernicus has suddenly discovered. And that's the opening point for the modern conspiracy theories. The other side of conspiracy is, for conspiracy theorists, the worst name they can use for someone in discussion is, how can you be so naive? That's something that in every pub, in every inn, in every university comes as the last point. You can't be so naive to believe that, I don't know, nothing was behind that. And then, of course, being called naive, let's say in my age, nothing can be worse than that. It's not very nice to be naive when you're young, but if you're old, it's a tragedy. And if you have, I don't know, PhD, and you're old, then it's a double tragedy. And you are expected not to be naive, at least. And then you have to accept some kind of rationality. And rationality is that 2 guys or 15 guys decided to do something against us. And there is the next politico-psychological element. The moment I can start believing there was conspiracy between these 2 guys against me, I have the reason to believe that I'm important. Otherwise, why would they be losing their times, wasting their times in doing something against me? So it's a kind of proof how important I am. Not only that I'm not naive, I'm intelligent, I understand what's going on, and I'm intelligent enough to understand how important I am because these 2 guys had to start an action against me. And that's the way where suddenly everything comes into its place and we have a very nice picture, organized picture. Nothing is really the result of coincidence. It happened because it had to be so. This is, of course, for intelligent people. And one of the very funny things that goes together with modern, massive or mass accepted conspiracy theories is that they tend to believe that people who accept conspiracy theories are kind of elite of people who understand what the others can't, because the majority is naive, and let them be. They're going to be victims of their own naivete while we are there to prepare for whatever is going to come, building tunnels or bunkers, whatever, to protect our lives when the Armageddon comes, and so on and so on and so on. The political context is, therefore, in presuming the clandestine activity against me, or rather against us, which is for ethno-nationalist construction very important. There is always a kind of, let's say, conspiracy. A few days ago, Croatia lost the chance to enter Olympic Games with its handball team, and the consequences, of course, how could we expect the French team not to use the opportunity to eliminate the real contester against them, which is Croatia, and which meant leaving Portugal to win against France in the last few seconds, and then Croatia was out. And it was absolutely clear. They had 3 goals 75 seconds before the end. Suddenly there were 1 goal for Portugal 3 seconds before the end of the game, and Croatia was out. And it's absolutely clear, or the commentators had absolutely no doubt in showing how it's going on. And why? Because we are important, we are so good, they had to conspire, Portuguese and French, against us to eliminate us from the Olympic Games in Tokyo. That's some, let's say, popular way of showing how it really works. Historically, it started some centuries ago with the first modern, and they're not ancient, the first conspiracy theory, and that was the so-called monita secreta, the concept of Jewish conspiracy to conquer the world. It started some 500 years ago, and then it was, in many respects, some kind of source for the most popular version of the conspiracy theories. That's the Protocol of the Elders of Zion, or Zion, how do you want to pronounce, which was then anti-Semitic or anti-Judaistic version. There was the first anti-Jesuits and then anti-Semite construction. Both of them had 3 common elements. A, we had someone who was our guy there, our man in Havana, who was ready to tell us the secrets of their organization, of the organization of Jesuits or the organization of Jews, and to inform us, that's the second element, how they plan to conquer the world. And 3, the way of conquering the world for them meant that only they would be in a position to control the most important elements in political or economic life, and all the others are going to be servants or slaves or people of secondary category in this real world. In the way it really worked, it had on one side consequences in the modern or 20th century conspiracy theories, when we had two new versions. One was a communist conspiracy. I think Dr. Strangelove is maybe a very famous movie by Stanley Kubrick, is maybe the best illustration of that. And on the other side, the CIA conspiracy, which in a way it's funny, has two branches. One is internal, the Americans who believe that there is CIA conspiracy with attempt on Kennedy and so on, and the communist construction of CIA conspiracy against the communist regimes in different parts of the world. I have even found a very nice piece in which a rather prominent professor claims that CIA invented the term conspiracy theory in order to counter the effect of discussions started by the claim that there was only one person responsible for the murdering of JF Kennedy. And they claim, in modern terms, it was started with CIA construction in order to protect their own secrets as well. It's very funny to see that anti-CIA constructions, CIA conspiracy theory constructions, are almost the same way formulated in Soviet Union in the 70s or in the leftist and liberal circles in the United States at the same time. So there was a kind of joint venture in trying to show how, let's say, dangerous or important these phenomena are. Monitor Secreta is the first modern or conspiracy theory, was relatively unimportant because it started in the beginning of 17th century when there was no mass circulation of information. It was basically something that was kind of gossip in the different centers of power, different centers around the kings or monarchs and so on and so on. While the Elders of Zion were basically important for the national socialistic construction, because Alfred Rosenberg, who was maybe the best propagandist of Hitler's era, after Hitler himself, of course, with his book, The Myth of 20th Century, was all the time deeply involved in propagation of the Elder of Zion books or booklets, and really believed that it contains elements of important truths, where the very important political elements comes in play, and this is the following one. If we can show that there is conspiracy against us or against me, then whatever I do is reaction. I'm not starting conflict. I'm defending myself. Because I have understood that two of them have prepared a kind of conspiracy, so I attack him. For all of you, it seems that I have attacked him. But basically, I was defending myself because I know the two of them have prepared a plot. And it gives me psychological and, what's very important, moral satisfaction and justification of basically aggressive action. Or to quote George Bush, preemptive action. That was something that was meant to be, again, element of defense. You know, they were already there. There are now some small, less important versions with the radical Islamic fundamentalism or Al-Qaeda, whatever. They're always there. You always have to be on guard, so to say. But in fact, we have to protect ourselves. And this is why it's a very efficient political tool. It gives me rationality in interpretation of world, so I can show some construction. Two of them met yesterday or had a telephone conversation or something, and then it all starts from there. Two, I am or we are important because they had to construct something against us. And three, we have the reason to believe that we are defending ourselves. We are not attackers. We are protecting what's rightfully ours.
Our way of life.
Yeah, our way of life, our women, our men one day, or I hope so. So whatever comes into play, or our values, or whatever is this. Again, based on some kind of rationality. This rationality, this perverted, as I've said, enlightenment theory, is something you can find, let's say, in QAnon in a very primitive level, because, to quote a very interesting article by Professor Anne McLaughlin, okay, they believe the group of satanic worship elites who run a child sex ring are trying to control our politics and media. And she said, okay, why they have to be satanic worship elite and child sex ring? Wouldn't one element be enough? They just didn't say they're ugly, let's say, or something as a third element. I mean, okay, it's enough. There are satanist worship elites, or there are child sex ring, or there is this pizza element and so on, but two or three elements just in some kind of pathetic style, it has to be some gathering of attributes or of elements, because they're not just bad guys, they are something more. You know? There's something you can find, let's say, in Stalin's speech many years ago, or in Hitler's speech and so on. That it's not just Jews, but it's Jewish plutocracy. This element, plutocracy, is now rather very popular, even among the people who are not anti-Semitic in direct way, but plutocratic elements are now very important in discussion of reaction to the COVID situation, because the people believe that two of the prominent rich people in the world are involved with their interest in producing the reaction. And that means we have to fight against the attempt of these rich people to control our lives, even if it might have direct negative consequences for our health, because we are in a position of being avant-garde, or the pioneers of fighting for the humanity against Soros or whoever there might be. And then you have the guy like Musk, who would say, well, we might be using some elements of controlling people for their own benefit, and then they say, didn't we say it? That's the whole point. Didn't we say? Even Musk himself has admitted this might be the truth. And then they say they are just trying to have something in our body to control our lives. And that's enough. It's not really vaccine. It's some small element of electronic equipment to make the control over my body or my life completely acceptable. Let me finish by saying that all these constructions have a very simple problem with something that was already tackled by two of my predecessors, the question of truth in politics. And the self-defeating problem with discussing truth in politics, I published an article a few days ago in Croatia, is that truth is not an element of politics. Politics begins where truth is out. Lie is much more element of politics than truth, because we cannot decide upon truth. Politics is about decision-making. You cannot make decision whether 2 + 2 is 4. So truth is something that's before politics. Whenever you discuss truth, you're stepping out of politics, you're discussing precondition for whatever type of politics. You cannot accept that majority of people would decide whether 3.5 is more than 3.2 or something. And that's the real problem. Truth is an element of totalitarian, quote unquote, politics, not of democratic or liberal or pluralistic politics, because it's a precondition for it. And when we then say against the conspiracy theories, they are not based on truth, which is almost always the fact, we are accepting the fact that we are not discussing politics. We are discussing a kind of lame basis of wrong politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Puchovski. I'm inviting other to this for the discussion, and I'm expecting somebody will join the discussion. If not, I will ask who is Kulenovic. Okay, thank you, Anis. Please.
Well, thank you. I hope you can hear me. So thank you all for very two interesting and stimulating discussions. What I want to, maybe not a question, sort of more kind of like a summary or a comment that might push us into discussion further. So what I found interesting is that although Blanusha and Professor Shermur are on completely different kind of tradition approaching this problem of conspiracy theory, so let's call it simplified Popperian and kind of anti-Popperian, I think what I found interesting is that their approach was very similar. They both treated it as a kind of mainly a question of epistemology, question of knowledge and understanding, right? And came to, interestingly, very similar conclusion, which is that there is a proper way, if we just as social scientists and philosophers can just explain to the wider public of how to think properly and how to process the informations properly, then we would kind of, as Nebisha said, we would make a distinction between warranted and unwarranted conspiracy theories, right? I'm more inclined to take an approach that was taken by Professor Puchovski, which is to look at conspiracy theory not mainly through epistemological point of view, but through the question of power and how conspiracy theories work as a way of dealing with power. And I think Professor Puchovski was right when he pointed out that the source of it is not a question of truth or not truth, but I would say the source of it is a question of impotence, right? Feeling that there are events beyond our control. And then it works, and here I'm following again Professor Puchovski, it works in both ways when we talk about power here. It works as a way of recognizing there's a hidden power that explains the events that we have no control over, and also by recognizing them. So by saying we are not naive, we recognize them, we reclaim our power, right? It's a way of shedding our impotence and kind of boosting ourselves up as kind of superheroes by seeing what's behind the curtain. And then I think that connects to what Professor Puchovski said in the last part of his presentation. Then it can be utilized by political players as a political tool, right? And then you use it to either recognize the internal, external enemies, to justify an action as a defense action and not as aggressive action, and so forth. So I'm much more inclined to think, and I'm not going to go into this because Nebisha and I've been discussing this for years, and he knows that I kind of don't agree with his understanding of that conspiracy theories are the same as conspiracies, and I always pull out Machiavelli's chapter on conspiracies from the 10 books on Tito Livius, and he always pulls other arguments on, so we're never going to reach an agreement here. But I think it might be useful for further discussion just to think, should we approach it as an epistemological problem of knowledge and understanding, or first and foremost as a question of power? How people who have no power, utilized conspiracy theories to try to shed their impotence, and how people who have power utilize it to further their political goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Enes. Somebody will comment, or we have further discussion? Oh, Jeremy will answer, of course.
Well, if I can make a comment on
yes,
that.
I
mean,
of course.
I
yes, you are invited.
Yes, no,
yes.
No, that's fine. I mean, what I would say is really, well, you can certainly make a claim that these things have to be understood in terms of issues about power, but that still then gets us back to the question, well, how is that claim of yours to be evaluated? Which brings us back then to the question of what are the appropriate kinds of criteria? And what I would say is, I mean, I did stress in what I was saying that there are some things which may be testable, there are others which may be opened to criticism in various other ways. So I'm not trying to claim that everything should be treated as an empirical theory, but I think that our third speaker made a very important point when he was referring to Copernicus, which is that if you claim that how things appear isn't the truth of the matter at all, then you owe us both to explain what is happening, but also to explain how that is to be assessed. And if I can also just add on this, I mean, there was a book a couple of years ago by Nancy Rosenblum and another collaborator on conspiracy theories in American politics, where she'd said one of the striking things about sort of Trump-style conspiracy theories is that there wasn't any theory there, that it was just, you know, lots of people are saying. Now, I think that just because of the sheer harm that can be done on the basis of claims that undermine and lead us to be skeptical about standard kinds of accounts of things, if they're wrong, that it is really important that people should be enticed into explicating what is supposed to be behind this. And I would say there that, I mean, Popper himself was writing at a time, I mean, his political ideas were really formed during the interwar period in Europe, when there were large-scale conspiracy theories being peddled about the overall course of events and history. And at least some of those within the Marxian tradition did refer to mechanisms and so on. But there was an awful lot on that side of things which didn't, where the stuff being put forward by the Nazis really was, in terms of intellectual content, just risible. But it seems to me, as someone who is certainly no Marxist, that the disappearance of serious Marxist explanations for what is supposed to be going on, and the disappearance of the idea that if you make some dramatic claim, you have to explain how it's supposed to be happening, is really to be regretted. And instead, we've got back to something which is as bad as one got in the interwar period, these vague ideas that, I mean, Soros or whatever is responsible for things that he couldn't conceivably be responsible for. And we're just, and behind that, this notion somehow that human agency directly, without constraints by structures, without constraints by what we know in political science about how politics works, without an appreciation of unintended consequences, that you know, there are intentions behind everything. This, it seems to me, I mean, people may, for various reasons, believe this because they're impotent. Well, they may well be impotent. And I would say to the gentleman amongst you that if you're not impotent now, it may well be something that comes to bite you in the future. And indeed, it is the case that ordinary citizens in most countries can't make much impression on a whole lot of things. We live in a world that is full of institutions, structural constraints, and so on. And at the very least, we can ask of people, if they try and explain what's happening in politics, give us an account about this. And if you're saying something dramatic, tell us and discuss with us how it's to be assessed, rather than just putting up with people saying all of this dangerous nonsense. It seems to me quite important.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. No, Nebojša is the first. He claimed this. Nebojša, and then Professor Puchovsky will answer, and I hope other people will join the discussion. If not, I have some questions for all of you. So please, Nebojša first.
I would like to give some remarks on Enes' thoughts and what I would like to. Enes said that Professor Jeremy and I are converging in our presentations, in our completely different approaches. Of course, I saw Professor's presentation before, and I constructed it according to his arguments to be, against his Popperian approach. And what differentiates us is, first of all, that he believes, I would say, in trust and in creation of a kind of in context which will a kind of tenets which will enable a fruitful deliberation, and by that decrease the level of conspiracism. What I'm saying is that we need more conspiracism, and I'm on the line of untrust. And how, especially because all these scholars before, especially from 30s to 70s, were relegating conspiracy theories, and it was a form of academic fear of contagion, some kind of conspiracy panic. So my point is that we should engage in conspiratorial thinking, in a critical conspiratorial thinking, which should be warranted. And the purpose of that is to empower citizens, of course. I can put that in the framework of Ronald Inglehart's theory of modified theory of modernization. So where if we accept that we are in a sort of endangered post-materialist period where citizens produce more and more pressure on institutions who cannot deal with such unpredictable and contingent environment, and what they carry with themselves with these conspiracy theories, actual conspiracy theories, is potential of destruction, of course. I think that socializing people in prudent conspiracism could change their behavior and could change also institutions. Don't ask me how. And in that sense, my presentation also deals with power. What I also presented is that there are two general ways how to study conspiracy theories, and one way is to which I didn't put an emphasis on such on this first way, which is actually my almost whole work with and interest for conspiracy theories since now was about such approach to conspiracy theories, is in a form of belief, where such beliefs could be used by political elites to mobilize citizens and for their own purposes, and also to use it for different reasons. Also, I think that was clear from my presentation that the most paranoid part of population in politics are political leaders.
Thank you, Nebojša. Although I agree with Enes that there is something in common, some common ground between you and Jeremy. But first is the reaction of Professor Puchovsky, then Christina and Tin. And after them, I will explain what I think about Enes' objections. So,
two things I want to add. One is something that you can find in a very interesting article by Brian Keeley, where he compares of conspiracy theories and belief in God, using the old formula, God works in mysterious ways. So it is already a giant conspiracy theory, and it begins with a very old formula. There is more here than it meets the eye. There is always something behind. It's never enough what I see, what I feel, what I smell, what I whatever can taste. There is something behind. And because there is something behind, it's a given, then I can explore it in different ways. The same author, Brian Keeley and Max Bempit, they published a very interesting text, The Applied Epistemology of Conspiracy Theories, an overview, very interesting overview, where they basically discussed very precisely these epistemological questions, but they started with the automatic tendency to make sense of the world by identifying meaningful relationship between stimuli, implying against that there is nothing given in what I see. So it has to be something behind. And that's always the problem. That's a kind of, I would say, undisputed belief. It cannot be as simple as that. There must be something behind it. It's not that I say I'm satisfied. But why did he say that? There must be some reason. It's not enough. Or I'm not satisfied. Why did he say that? And when we start this, Germans have very nice formula, hinterfragen, asking things behind what we see, what is phenomenal level, and behind the phenomenal level is the essential level. That's the old tradition. We open this, let's say, store this new element or this new level of discussion. The second very short comment when Machiavelli was already mentioned. There is a small booklet, not commonly discussed when Machiavelli is in question. It's about the life of someone called Castruccio Castracani, a very small booklet, which is basically a kind of biographical sketch for the prince. And there is, as far as I know, first time this sentence, he did not know what was going on. It's coming, I think, 2 or 3 times. There's very nice interpretation of a German author about it. I've, for the moment, forgotten the name. Kirchheimer is the name, of course. Anton Kirchheimer. He published a book, 89, 90, something like this. And he saw 3 times in this small booklet, the life of Castruccio Castracani, comes this sentence, he did not know what was going on. And he was not satisfied with this, of course. And this is this impotence, which is, of course, something that, to quote my mother, she's 99, we are all going to hope to be old, but it's not a given. Some of us might die before being impotent, let's say. So it's not such a given thing.
Thank you, Professor Puchovsky, Christina, and then Tina Radovani.
Yes, I have a question for Professor Jeremy.
Okay.
Well, Yeah, you said that in your opinion, it is not wise to block conspiracy theories. I suppose that you think on social media, right? But if you can say something about conspiracy theories related to COVID vaccination, if we know that exposure to various misinformation and conspiracy theories influence the decision to vaccinate. Also, because we know that misinformation and conspiracy theories spread more rapidly on social media than news from the reliable sources. So Facebook has also banned a wide range of misleading and conspiracy theories about vaccination. So I would like to hear your opinion on that.
Thanks very much. I guess what I'd say is this. I think that a key problem is who gets to judge who should be suppressed. And given that all of our knowledge is fallible, it seems to me that it is very dangerous to give that kind of power over to anyone. I think a big problem at the moment is that we have in social media, but also in other media which are driven by just popular demand, the kind of natural wish for excitement and to be shocked and to be let in onto secrets has kind of overpowered the possibility of our actually conducting this kind of thing that our second speaker didn't seem to like very much. I mean, namely the notion that we might actually be able to create forums in which we, in effect, demand of people who are making claims of various sorts that they actually make a case for them, and to explain if they're appealing to evidence, what evidence they're appealing to, and so on, where this can be open to scrutiny. I think if we can't do this, then we're in a real mess. And I think personally, I mean, if I could be made a dictator of the universe, I would simply have restricted social media to pictures of cats and would really have forced people, if they are making factual claims, and I don't mean just empirical claims, but claims about the character of the world and something of this sort, into forums within which they can be called to account in a reasonably serious way. I mean, I have been very struck over the virus period by the degree to which panels of experts are informing politicians of things, but where ordinary citizens have had no chance to put questions to them, to ask them about things, if there are regulations for lockdowns. Well, what actually is the rationale behind that? I mean, I'm not saying that government isn't going to have to take decisions and so on, but it's in this area, working on the basis of supposed expert knowledge, but where we don't have the possibility of having that expert knowledge questioned. And I guess my own view is we have to rebuild institutions of the sort that Nebojša doesn't seem to like. That if we can't do this, then to use an Australianism, we're stuffed. I mean, I think that the situation we're in at the moment is a terrible one, because people don't seem to have any appreciation that they're acting in situations in which there are constraints on what they might be able to get or to wish for. And there's no forum in which these things can be articulated and discussed. And I would stress once again that I think that any forum of this sort is basically a proposal for and then an instantiation of various suggestions about rules we should all be submitted to for the sake of the discussion, but where, for me, in this context, as a broadly Popperian in my views, I think our views about all of this stuff are fallible and themselves need to be opened to criticism and improvement.
Thank you, Jeremy. And now Tin Radvani will comment.
Hi.
Discuss.
Just want to actually to echo what Professor Schirmer has just said in a slightly different way. I think we are in a bind looking at this sort of distinction between just being purely epistemic phenomenon or being purely social / political / power relation phenomenon. I think the best way probably to approach it is to paraphrase an old saying about justice. Truth needs to be done and truth needs to be seen to be done. So there is an essential social and political and communitarian element in dealing with these phenomena, which actually goes to what Jeremy was just saying, the institutional problem of communicating in society, which is trustworthy and truthful. Otherwise, we are, as he very colorfully said, stuffed. So, in a sense, I think the dilemma is to a degree a false one. In the same way, it is also a false one whether truth is prior to politics or not. I think in a post-truth society that we are currently in, actually truth becomes a key political instrument or a key political virtue to be utilized to achieve certain political goals. Actually, this is where now the politics start. Just as an illustration, quite interestingly, one of the most ideologically driven governments in UK history, EA Boris Johnson's, has stopped communicating with the public through a public broadcaster prior to the COVID epidemic. As soon as the epidemic started, the government allowed its ministers to come to the public broadcaster to communicate with the public ineffectively. So suddenly, a very ideologically driven, almost to the degree of conspiratorial government has shifted its perception of what the value of truth in society is, that it's actually a key force for collective action.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, just one more other thing regarding Professor. Sorry. If Copernicus is a good example of conspiratorial thinking, in a way, as Professor Puchovsky suggested, I think that philosophy actually is the supreme conspiracy in all of this, because it rests on the assumption that, not everything is what it seems. This is what we do as philosophers.
Thank you, Tin. I would ask Nebojša. Okay, Nebojša will comment, but before...
Oh, first, Professor Puchovsky.
Before... Okay.
Please do not marginalize him.
You want to comment?
It's kind of ageism, whatever.
Yes.
No. Excuse me. So
conspiracy against the old elder.
I can't see it. So okay. Professor Puchovsky, and then I will ask Nebojša, and Nebojša will answer. So please.
I'll be okay.
First you.
Okay. Very short. The point is, first of all, with philosophy and Copernicus, you're not supposed to know philosophy and you can live quite normally. But you're supposed to know what's about your world. Philosophy was always a kind of elitistic, let's say, trait. But Copernicus wanted to give us account on our world. And that is something obligatory for everyone, while philosophy is not. Of course, philosophy was there with theology, with the religious construction, so there is no doubt about it. But again, as opposed to theology, philosophy was for few dozen persons or few hundred then later, while theology through the churches was directly, socially, and politically active. We come then to this second element. What we know about politics, the truth about politics is that there is no truth in politics. That's what Hannah Arendt, in my opinion, very rightfully claims. Namely, post-truth society is a society in which we again have to fight to get out of this politics to truth in order to come to the new politics. Because the moment, again, when truth is a given, we have a situation which it is today. Experts appear to be leading the society. Medical expert, physical expert, ecological experts, they are the leaders. Say, well, I am prime minister, but basically experts have said this. And I'm just a kind of speaker for the experts. And this is manipulation with truth, of course. But this is something that's, in this respect, very important. The truth is something that's out of political realm. You can't discuss politics, truth in politics. Because the last question is majority on my side or not? Or have I power enough to force you to accept my truth? Both of these elements have nothing to do with the epistemological elements concerning the truth. It's about power again.
Thank you. I will ask Nebojša before he answers to other speakers. So, and I follow Christina's questions. So she asked Jeremy what to do with social media, because his recommendations are mostly about newspapers and about TV shows, and but what to do with social media, and your position about paranoid as a kind of skeptic in the environment of social media looks for Jeremy terrible. Do you think it is not terrible what we have with social media, with that paranoia on social media, or you have some recommendation or some skill or some proposal how to solve that paranoia? Because you switch in your last slide to education. Not you left social media as a problem in the previous slides, so please. And of course, if you can,
I would like to answer you and also to others, to Professor Jeremy, of course. What the kind of skepticism I'm proposing and I'm advocating should protect people from social media or media bubbles. Social media bubbles, as it was explained by Professor Jeremy. Those so-called echo chambers, they function, on some kind of personalized relationships, arousal of emotions, of similar experiences, and it is usual for those people mostly to follow those guys who share their own views, and then they could develop conspiracy theories inside those echo chambers. Skeptical conspiracism or prudent paranoia I'm advocating would protect them by checking other sources to argument with others. Maybe something that could be equated with those forums proposed by Professor Jeremy. And now I would like to answer him in a sense that I'm not against those forums, but I think that confronting people, I'm doubting whether the open call for example, of some academician or us to speak and confront with people who believe in conspiracy theories, which we consider unwarranted, will be unsuccessful in the same way as fact-checking portals are unsuccessful. Why? Because they think we are part of the same conspiracy. And what I would like also to comment on Professor Puchovsky statement that in conspiracism that there is a heart of conspiracism, if I understood him well, that there is always something behind. I think that is a part of our modernist tradition, that there is something always behind. It is a model of surface and depth. And it is not by chance that I said this is that conspiracism is a form of like hermeneutics of suspicion. Maybe what I'm proposing is to find connections with more sophisticated hermeneutics of suspicion. For example, in Frankfurt School, when you read culture industry, there you can find some lines which are pretty similar to conspiratorial thinking. And I think that communication between and together with all these scholars who were prominent in hermeneutics of suspicion will help us not to throw out baby with the water with this classical approach to conspiracy theories as something that is completely, disconnected with our traditions.
Okay, thank you. Božo, and then Jeremy will answer. Probably it's better to hear first Božo, and then Jeremy will probably answer both or comment.
Okay, I'll make just a short comment. In my opinion, conspiracy theories are not theories because their proponents do not intend to use scientific rigors, to use verification process to establish the truthfulness or that the theory is false. Those theories, in fact, are beliefs which influence behavior. And there are different kinds of beliefs which influence behavior. First of all, religious beliefs, and then ideologies. In my opinion, the crucial question of our time, how is it happened that such beliefs, which are called conspiracy theories, became so important and so influential in our everyday life, in political life of democratic societies? In my opinion, we are witnessing failure of process of project of enlightenment and project of democratic society, democratic political system. Those how to say enlightenment project and democracy were connected by shared belief that politics could be organized in rational way, and people got impression that politicians are not ruling, but that they are governing societies implementing by implementation of scientific knowledge and scientific procedures. But at once, we are witnessing that that's not truth. And that's why those proponents of conspiracy theories got so popular. Because ordinary people who were regularly educated, who got certain kind of scientific skepticism, suddenly started not to believe in existing political institutions and to established politicians. So, but I think that the part of the answer is Jeremy's proposal regarding procedures of discussing political and belief issues.
Okay, Jeremy, you have something to add because Božo agrees with you.
Yes, I'd like just to make a critical comment directed at the two other speakers. First of all, I think we should try to bring truth into every area, but as an aspiration, not as something that we think that we have. And so I think that all claims should be opened to critical appraisal, but I would want to say critical appraisal doesn't mean just empirical. There are the sorts of criteria which are used in assessing historical accounts and so on. I mean, we can elaborate these. I worked with Popper, and he talked about falsifiability, but he also talked about the significance in science of metaphysical research programs and about how one sets about criticizing non-empirical ideas. The other thing is, I think that the proponents of the hermeneutics of suspicion are doing a major disservice to humanity. Why? Well, because rather than treating one another as fallible interlocutors from whom we might hope to learn one another, they basically give us arguments, or purport to be giving us arguments, why we shouldn't take what other people are saying at face value, why we should be suspicious of the very fact that they're claiming that something is true, but where conspicuously they fail to put forward their theories in a way that also applies to their discourse. I mean, take, for example, Foucault, who I think is I simply find it difficult to understand why he is accorded the respect that he is, other than amongst people who have got a sadomasochistic trait to them and get kind of turned on by the gruesome bits in Discipline and Punish. But he basically kind of sets about undermining claims to truth while inviting his readers simply to presuppose that what he is able to do is, in advancing these theories, to put forward claims that are candidates for truth, although he conspicuously fails to indicate and to allow really for the possibility that a lot of his far-fetched claims can actually, the historical claims say, can actually be assessed. And your friends in the Frankfurt School, look, I think that Marxism is extremely important, but what happens in the Frankfurt School is that you get the, as it were, the taking for granted of certain Marxist-like themes, but it's never actually explicated what they actually believe to be true or how we should assess them. I mean, all of this is, as it were, removed from the table, and that we should just accept it uncritically. I mean, rather than more of this, I kind of say the place in hell, which I suggested should be occupied by Donald Trump, should also have some areas for some of these people.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is very provocative.
This is a suitably moderated version of what I'm saying.
What you think? So, okay, Puchovsky already asked me to answer, and of course, probably Nebojša will answer. So, with Foucault. Okay, please.
Well, two things. First of all, in a public discussion some 20 years ago, Habermas discussed Foucault and then said, for a guy who claims there is no truth, he had a lot of footnotes in his book. And that's quite an argument, I would say. I mean, you should write essays if you don't think truth is such an important matter. You do not quote a physician from 1645 in Liège who find this miraculous case of a lunatic and so on and so on. But it's a joke. The real question with Foucault and with the Marxists and with the Frankfurt School is that they believe the truth is a historical product. And then you discuss the production of truth in class theory, in different class relations, in domination, and so on. A very simple and very well-known example. Very beginning of Das Kapital von Marx. In the first chapter, brings the legendary formula of character mask, where he claims that capitalists are not really subjects, they are masks of capital. Behind me is capital. I'm mask of academia, let's say, or something. I'm mask of whatever. I'm not who I am. I'm a mask. And this is why I open, again, and coming to this, and that's what I have said. My colleague Blanusha did not, I think, understand. My very beginning was to say that this is the essence of modern problematic with Copernicus and the others, showing that some things cannot be seen and they are true just because we can't see them. It's not just a question of culture industry, this last part of the Adorno and Horkheimer dialectics of enlightenment. It's the Marxist approach, claiming we are not discussing the truth, but the production of truth. In this respect, they say the same what you have said, Professor Sedmore, when you said truth is here kind of orientation, something we tend to. In my understanding, in this respect, I'm not a Marxist, truth is a criterion. And if it is a criterion, then there is no political discussion. If I can say, shut up, this is not true, I mean, shut up is, let's say, for internal usage, or please understand, and so on and so on, but basically, shortly, shut up, this is not true, then there is no political discussion. This is why I use this formula. And I can say shut up because it's something that's obvious that I'm saying it's Tuesday today. And I said, yes, sorry, it's Tuesday. And the discussion is out. We have nothing to say. The moment then I can say something after what no one has anything to add because, yes, you're right. That's the end of political discussion. The last point. The truth of politics is that the political problem is the motivation to act. What people believe to be true motivate people to act. In the moment I believe something is true and start acting, my belief becomes political truth. Political truth is what makes me politically act. This might be epistemologically wrong. I might really believe that there are crocodiles, whatever, all these theories are illuminates and so on and so on. But if it makes me act, if it makes me enter capital, it is a political fact. And that's, I think, the difference.
Thank you. Will Nebojša answer or not? Do you have comment or not?
I have some positions, but let's give others some floor.
If somebody wants to comment from other people who are in the discussion still, we discuss already 2 hours. So 2 hours. Now it's 5 o'clock here in Croatia and 4 o'clock p.m. in Dumfries in Scotland. Thank you.
It's still Great Britain.
Still Great Britain. Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So thank you. Do you have, Jeremy, some concluding remarks or some concluding comment or not? So, Jeremy.
I think that I shouldn't, just because I think so many issues have been opened up that really we could continue for a long time. All I would say is that I would like to thank you for organizing this and the other participants. I certainly thought that the issues were enjoyable, but that we really didn't get into the depths of anything much, and that I would think that it would, I think it'd be very nice if we could have further such discussions, if you all could put up with them. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Finally, I will explain why I mentioned several times that Božo is coming. Our next discussion is about his book. Please show that book, which is entitled like thinking about politically, no, I cannot
Thinking
read.
about politics.
Thinking about politics. Unfortunately, it will be in Croatian, so Jeremy will inform you what happened. So I hope you will. And of course, for the end of this discussion, I still don't have answer to Christina's question and my question, what to do with social media. I know what to do with truth, what to do with politics, but what to do with social media and with what Božo mentioned with that enlightenment and democratic project. I don't know what to do with them. So thank you very much again, and we will meet on April
the 8th.
The 8th of April. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.